This episode of Fuel the Fire TV podcast is brought to you in part by Kickaboo Meat Seasoning. Go to kickabooshops.com and enter the promo code FTFTV for 10% off all products and seasonings.
All right, well, welcome to Fuel the Fire podcast. We're here with Matt, and I like to say Maranger, but I don't know if he goes by Maranger or
Maranger.
Maranger is how you would say it in if we were in Quebec, but we're not, so I'm going to say Maranger. But Matt is a friend of ours, fellow Islander, and we've invited him to the podcast because he's got a specific skill, one that both Jesse and I really admire. It's something that we both love to do, which is to kind of try to play guitar. But Matt is something different. Matt is a luthier, and I can't wait.
And make guitar.
So like it's a completely different. He makes guitars from scratch.
Yeah, you're being totally modest when you said he's got a skill. I learned like 3 skills from Matt in the last half an hour setting up for this thing. dude's a vibe.
Well, I'm glad that I could bring something.
Well, so a luthier, I mean, you know, people have to look that word up for one to start, right?
And if you want to go back to the being French, it's pronounced luthier.
Luthier, right? But the it is truly an art form.
Absolutely. Like
it is. I think it's beyond. It's beyond a craft. There's obviously craftsmanship.
Sure.
Right.
It's multidisciplinary. That's a
right.
great way of putting it.
Yeah.
Like there are people who just focus on finishing, or just focus on inlay, who just focus on wood harvesting, or just focus on wood curing. You know, the facets within the craft it's ridiculous. Like there's one guy, Michael Gurian, who manufactures just like wood purfling inlays, these little intricate lines, and that's all he does. And bridge pins too, actually, I should say. He does a couple things, but his main thing is purfling and pins, and he manufactures them for all the major manufacturers of guitars. And that's just one element of the guitar. And so there's so many people within the craft who are focusing on one element, right? And there are many people like me who try to do a little bit of everything. Right.
But I mean, a little bit of everything means you make the whole fucking guitar.
And we go from harvesting wood in the bush, like I was telling you about,
which hang on.
Dude.
Which is gonna bring us to a whole nother plane in terms of what we're gonna do and what we have planned for a semi, I don't even know what it's going to be called. We're going to make a short film for one about this process, and this has my attention because when we talk about the essence of the podcast, like Jess was raised the bar, or fuel the fire, that the passion that people have to do what you're going to explain right now about going out onto the land to harvest, right, really actually is the essence of pulling and creating music out of thin air.
Right.
And I know when Matt and I started our podcast, like our vision down the road was to get people just like you in the studio to share that passion, and just having conversations with you the last few times that we've met. It honestly is that draw and that energy that we've been looking for. So I'm super excited to have you in today, man.
I'm so glad that you guys feel like, because for me, I take it for granted. I'm like, this is every day. And,
right.
You know, like everything in life that you're invested in, you know, there are glory moments and there's like total shit moments,
right,
where you're like, and I have them, they almost are like bipolar in a sense, where you're like, you have those glory moments and then you like turn around and look at something else, you're like, oh my God, what the hell's going on?
Right.
And so it's great. I'm glad that you appreciate and see that I still have passion about it, because sometimes I'm not sure if I do.
Right.
Because I'm so invested in it, and because even when I started, I had expectations that I realized were like unrealistic, and that to reach this potential that I'm even still working towards, it's still going to be like 20 years down the line.
So are you ever happy with the product that you finish?
Which is the irony of like everything that I do. And it's funny, I shouldn't say never.
Like not happy, or like you always, there's room for improvement.
There's always room for improvement. And like I'm, like I think a really honest artist with themselves is how an artist, if you're honest with yourself, that's how you'll progress as an artist, right? Like, or at least if you want to.
Right.
I mean, I think some people are content and just like, and I respect that, and I like wish I could even have that myself. Where just because I recognize that I make like a very fine guitar, but for me it's all about constant incremental improvements for sure.
Right.
In every aspect, but that's where it can drain the passion, but
it could drive it too at the same time.
It. You're right, and I realized that recently, where like drove myself absolutely insane recently, and in the end I look back and I'm like, wow, did I ever improve like crazy? Like, just because I was so motivated, it was essentially came down to finishing, and I had this epiphany where you can build a fantastic guitar, but if it doesn't have the finish to really blow people's minds, they won't truly see it for what it is. It's like,
well, I remember specifically, when you blew my mind the first time, and so a little bit of backstory. Meg, his better half, Meg Middleton, I was one of her colleagues, and we taught at a school together, and was how I kind of got to know of Matt as the mailman first, and because Matt drives used to drive a mail car.
Well, I still do.
Oh, do you?
But I'm retired from the post office, thankfully. So.
Okay.
Speaking of which, he came out here with the Honda with the driver's.
Yeah,
on the other side, that's his car.
Like
you took a bus to.
I flew across the country.
Oh, you flew to BC,
and it came off a boat that came from Japan.
and then you drove it back.
I drove it back.
Why didn't
I
you
slept
get
in a ditch in Saskatchewan.
Really?
Yeah. No. We can't go any further until I hear that. So what do you mean? You flew all the way to BC, or you drove to BC?
Flew to BC, grabbed the car.
Because he ordered it.
Because I ordered it. Because it was like nothing.
Special
it was like
for work.
No, it's just like, because in Japan, look, are we gonna get into this on the podcast?
Yeah.
I
want to go into
So
this.
so apparently in Japan, a car after 100,000 clicks or 10 years, whatever one comes first, gets taken off the road, and essentially is like a giant paperweight, isn't worth anything. And so there's a market in North America to buy, and you can buy luxury cars from Japan that are right-hand drive for like a pittance. It's insane. So like I bought my car for something like $5,500 Canadian, and then I had to have it shipped, which is about $2,000, and then all the paperwork and all that stuff. When if I were to try and buy that vehicle in Ontario, it would be like $15,000. So.
Right. So you cut it in half, and then you also
I have an import.
and you increase your productivity by like how many fold? 4?
I saved 2 hours every day when I did that.
Out of what's your drive? What's a run?
It was a slog.
So like 4-hour drive?
It was 4-hour drive. For me.
So it would take you 6 in a car.
Easy.
Right? So you're saving 33%, right? You save 50% on the car. Like when you start every day, you're like, tenfold ahead.
But then you don't make any fucking money at that job.
Well, it's the post office. But it's still a way to go at it.
Let's not talk about economics of that shit.
How do you
I thought making guitars, let's talk about reality here. I thought being a guitar maker was a more insane prospect, and now I realize after being a mailman that working for the government is a stupider idea. Just so you know, and I'm glad that's on record, and I hope that they fucking hear that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Because they laughed at me, like a few people were like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna go make guitars," and I'm like, actually, like I don't even want to break down the economics of it compared to that job. Yeah. But it makes more sense for me now to do what I'm doing.
Well, I laugh at you every time I see you in that fucking car when you're driving on the other side. on the other side of where he's supposed to be, because then he can just reach over and put the mail in those mailboxes.
So
right?
how is that when you drive that back from BC for the first time? You're hopping in a vehicle on the other side.
I had already been driving on the other side with another car. I already had a Corolla that was on the other
Oh,
side.
so you were acclimatized to
Oh,
the
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
to drive.
You know what? The first time, it is though. It fucks with you because Derek and I went to Jamaica one time, and my brother and I remember we were driving on the wrong side of the road. We mopeds, and we're following this guy to some village, and we're like probably gonna be about to be murdered, and we're driving down the road trying to keep up to him on mopeds, and he's way up there, and we see a dump truck coming down the road, a big corner. It's this monster dump truck, and I thought, because I was behind Derek, holy shit, that thing's on the wrong side of the road, right? So, and I see Derek in front of me just do a big foot slap with his sandal on and come across to the other side, thinking, holy shit, that truck's on the wrong side of the road. When he got to the other side, he realized now he's on the wrong side of the road. So he pulls back on and gets into the right lane, because that truck was actually on its right side, right? And the logic, like when you see it and it's, you're doing whatever, driving the machine, it fucked us up. Like, you know what I mean? It takes some getting used to. Absolutely.
That's what I mean. And even being on the Canadian roads where you have to be on the right side, but you're driving on the ditch side, I feel like that would take some getting used to right away.
It's actually, for me, I prefer it now because I know where I am in relation to the ditch, and I just hug, and I'm just don't worry about you assholes in your big trucks who just drive in the middle of the fucking road.
Shit, that's funny. But so that's how I know Matt as from a partner of a colleague of mine, but when he first blew my mind, we were over there for some, I don't know, it was just a get together.
We had a gig, and then after the gig was when Jen Hall played.
Right.
You guys came over.
Is that when that was the first one?
Yeah, that was the first one.
And anyway, he busted out. I went into his shop, and I'm like, what the fuck is all this stuff, right? And I thought you put guitars together. I didn't understand, right? And he pulled out this guitar, and it had no a hole in the front. The hole was on the top, right?
It was on the side,
on the side
and the top. It was where the top and the sides meet.
And you made it that way because he's like, I'm like, this is weird. And he goes, yeah, well, I fucked up something up here. So then I just was like, you know what? I'm gonna make the sound hole, or what's it called? The sound hole,
yeah.
right up on top of the guitar. So when you're playing it, the thing's playing right at you, right? And then he just started into this riff, and I was just like, dude, what the fuck is this? And that's where it was an epiphany for me of oh, okay, he makes guitars from scratch.
Yeah,
right?
and I try to make really, man, it's hard to sometimes. I just want to sound modest about this, but it's because I invest so much of my time and research and I try to make a guitar with no ego. And so this to me is and what you saw too was just me trying to express what I appreciate about modern guitar making. And I realized when I first started, I thought I was going to be a real traditional guitar maker. And now I've come to realize I'm a real modern guitar maker. I really like the modern school because it is really trying to just improve every aspect of the design, including the aesthetic. And so doing that weird sound hole, as much as I wasn't the first one, and that's the beauty of it, is often when I'm doing it may be the first time you see it, but to tell you the truth, I'm really not the first one doing it.
I know. I totally get that. And I actually want to backtrack a little bit because the modesty there, one, I can try and appreciate that. But as far as the ego is concerned, those guitars have an ego. Mammoth Lightning Rod, that guitar,
that guitar is
a serious, he has an ego problem from the start. Right? You know what I mean? That guitar we saw the other day. Yeah, but he's built that way. I mean, he's a LeBron James kind of character.
Is a bit of a king. You're just oof. And this one actually, I'm glad I brought this one because this to me kind of represents what I like, and that's why I keep saying this would be my guitar, because it's totally unique for sure. but super functional. Like beneath the hood, that's the thing about what I'm trying to do is I want to make a highly functional guitar. Sure, it looks good, and sure, it's like well built, and yeah, I'm using great materials, but I want because I'm a repairman, and I noticed a lot of guitar makers probably don't spend as much time dealing with broken guitars, but like I fixed probably 1,500 some odd guitars at this point, and if you notice how many pulled bridge pins I deal with, why would I ever build in that style? And like there's all these things that, you know, like dovetail neck joints. I respect like tradition. I appreciate where people think like that guitar sounds good because it's made this way, therefore I should make guitars that way. But you're not factoring in the fact that that thing has had almost 100 years to be aged. And that's the beauty of making instruments is they age and they mature. They're like totally like people are starting to use the same adjectives in describing wine as they are guitars because there's a lot of like nuances and there's a lot of stuff that's hard to translate into
details,
words, right? Details,
and they get better over time.
That's it. And it's like I have this thing with myself when I first string up a guitar. I'm really like slack because I go like, just wait 3 months, man. Just wait 3 months.
Wait to string it up?
No. Like once it's strung up to understand really what it's going to sound like. Because at first it's kind of like
tight. It's
kind of like a baby when it first comes out of the womb. It's not really sure what to do, and then you see it over time. Like it starts to know what to do, and that's the thing is like wood. Once it's like exposed to these vibrations, and you're just it's used to like the mechanics of being assembled in a guitar. Because really, the way that I look at it is this all these elements were not really meant to be combined in this sort of
they were, dude.
entity. Oh, I know they were in
it's that someone fucking figured it out. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. But I mean, I'm talking about like
in their like natural state or whatever.
Right. And so over time, as they get exposed to it and as they become, you know,
get loose in their skin.
They get loose. They're like, okay, I can sing. Like I can learn to sing. And then all of a sudden, you have a guitar that is full on just responding in a way that, like. When I first strung it up, it didn't even resemble. You know, I've had the luxury of being able to see guitars from the beginning of my career come back, right? Like actually, right now in my shop, I'm fixing my 9th guitar I ever made, and the thing is a Canon. It's so cool and then like I overbuilt it, and like I look at it and I'm like, that's not even. I don't even want to associate myself with it, but it's amazing. To see the evolution, it's amazing to see how they mature.
Okay, but you have to back it up because that's.
I'm gonna get really.
You know what? No, I need a drink.
How do you manage your judgment? Like, I feel like you're probably your worst critic. And I mean, moving forward from that first guitar, when you look at that for the first time, what goes through your head? Like, I feel like you're not fully finished that. I feel like today you're still not done that first guitar.
Yeah, well, it's a really good point. And if anything, the first guitar I ever made, I still have, which is cool. Like I'm glad to say that even though I sold it and I managed to buy it back, that's probably the only guitar that I would say like I laid to rest and was like content with. Oddly enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because it took so much time. You know, I didn't know anything about woodworking. I didn't know anything about finishing. I didn't know anything about electronics. I didn't know anything about anything. I felt like a fucking moron. It was amazing. Like,
how do you start building from not knowing anything about that to getting to where you are?
I got lucky. Like I went to school and I luckily had the ability to learn from people who really, really knew what they were doing. And quickly I learned that even in this 1 year time where I was, you know, had the opportunity to learn all this stuff, I was going to leave and continue. The crazy thing is I didn't realize till about 2 or 3 years later, which would have been like maybe only 3 or 4 years ago, that this is going to be a never ending journey. Like I'm never going to stop learning. And so I don't know if I'll ever even be ever happy. That's the other side to that, right? It's like, I don't know. So, but I'm beginning to just accept it more. I'm just like not questioning it as much. Cause for a while I was like, really kicking myself and really like hard on myself because I just wanted to push myself so hard. But then like recently, especially with like Mammoth Lightning Rod, like when I started playing that thing, I've been playing it constantly. I'm just like, why do I really need to push myself anymore? Right now, I'm doing something.
Let's just make a bunch of these things.
Well, that's what I'm like. Maybe I've got like something for now that I'm content with. Like, to say that I'm content is actually saying a lot.
If you did that, if you let's say you got to a point where, say Ladybug, right, and you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna build 20 of these guitars and then just see, and then just number them like that, right? And from those incremental improvements as you're making that guitar, right? Maybe 18 is the one that just was like perfect. You know what I mean? And then just like, you know what? I'm done with that. And then now I'm going to go on to make 20 Mammoth Lightning Rods.
Right. And like, even you're picking out like individuals, and like all my instruments now are going to be individuals. There's never going to be two alike. So it's more like when I say I'm going to stick with the style, it's more like general ingredients.
But that would be cool too.
Yeah, I you know what, I
like limited edition craziness.
Yeah, but they're all limited edition. If there's only one of every one of them,
I know, but like if you
get more limited.
Yeah,
dude.
but if you're like saying, it's like, well, you talk to artists and like, hey, that artist only does originals, but that artist does prints, but this artist that does the prints makes 50 times more money, right? Because that's what they do. They do the replica, and they do, and then they're able to.
You're bringing up the other side
because there's an economy to it.
You're right, and to be fair, that would probably be the more economical, business minded. Like that would be the more intelligent choice. If I could actually produce those numbers though in a time, like I don't think I could actually make 20 guitars in my shop. In less than like let's say, because I'm averaging about 8 to 9 a year. Think about that.
What if you supervised me and Jesse?
Yeah. Okay, you guys are hired. And that deer over there.
Yeah, for sure. We'll carve antler bone too, right? But
you got Poppy's a year and 14. She's like just a year old, so we can recruit her, right? So,
yeah, we can recruit her for inspiration.
Yeah.
Because Matt and his wife Meg, his way better half, Meg, just had this beautiful little girl named Poppy, and like fatherhood is fucking fantastic.
It's the best,
right?
And I'm fortunate. I quit my job to spend all day with her and then work at night, which is
perfect.
It's amazing.
Yeah. You don't miss out.
No, I don't.
Get to be there
for sure.
Yeah,
and it inspires me every day. Like that's where I'm feeling too, like this contentment where I'm like, finally, like maybe I'm landing on my feet here. Like I'm like, fuck, I struggled for so many years, and now I'm like, I was in the shop today working on a guitar that totally is going to resemble this. It'll be the first time that I've like actually established not only an aesthetic but a structural sort of system where I'm like, I do bolt-on necks with a mortise and tenon joint, which is tradition meets being modern. I do like a wraparound tailpiece. It's a laminate tailpiece, so that's 3-ply. Usually now I'm doing a bit of like 5-ply. I'm even going to start using copper and aluminum and steel in the tailpiece here in the back. So and that's kind of like, it's again combining a bit of that modern with tradition, and that's. A lot of these little subtle things are, I don't know, becoming a dad has been really inspiring. I'm kind of just like really, really grateful for my time that I have in the shop. And I feel like now that I'm able to spend the days with my daughter and the nights in the shop, it's like I get in there and I'm
driven,
very inspired and driven.
Let's hear something.
So you've been doing. Hold on, before Matt plays, you've been making these for what, 7 years?
So I started I went to school in February 2010, so it's almost been 9 years.
9 years you've been making this, and I would imagine the weeks and the amount of time that you put into one of these guitars, you're actually leaving a little bit of you in that, and you've produced something, and you could see something come from nothing. and then that's manifested into you, and you probably carry something with you with that guitar.
And then the guitar carries
Like-
it
like-
well,
like-
as well.
For lack of better terms, like that's your child. You produce that. Like
100%, dude. And that's how I referred to it forever. Like I used to joke about how I was like running an orphanage, you know, like, and you're just like, here, like I hate to see them go sometimes.
And I'm just from my perspective, because I don't have any kids. When you had your first kid a year and a half ago, I mean, tell me how that compares or not at all. Like I have no idea what either of those feelings feel like.
Well, like they're definitely like the one of having a child, like in your human being and their human being, you're gonna realize like
Yeah,
influence
yeah.
that
There's
you're
a
gonna have on them and
there's
all that.
there's a point where and without going into the details
Yeah.
of when you realize, like, holy
Shit,
fuck,
yeah.
there's a human that like there's a whole nother human coming. That part. That's the thing. That's the inspiration.
That's the difference, right?
Yeah.
That's where you're like, yeah, like I for me too. It's gonna be amazing to see Poppy like grow up around this.
Yeah.
Like I know it's gonna be a unique experience for sure. I mean, I play music all the time now. I'm actually picking up the organ, which is fun. Like,
Right.
like it's almost actually rejuvenated my love of music too,
Yeah.
which is
Well,
cool.
kids do all. Kids do that all the time. Kids just want to dance, right?
Right,
And they
that's
don't
it.
care. They're just like, they hear music. It just makes them move.
So true. It's so true. And I have like, we leave a guitar in the house, like in every corner. I try.
It's way different though, and I think it's way different for dads because, like, yeah, your partner's pregnant, and they're doing all of the shit, right? Like we're just like we just do our normal shit. They're growing so they know they're pregnant. They know a human's coming. But for us, it's like, rub your feet or whatever, right? It's just it happens way later for us.
Oh, it's so true. He's right. He totally nailed it.
They're
Like,
like,
I'm
yeah,
just like,
shit, yeah, I know it's coming. Like I've been carrying it for 9 months. But for me anyway, and I think I'm fairly in tune with that. I was like, no, I didn't. This is something.
well, I was scared shitless first, and then I was like super overwhelmed and inspired and overjoyed, and then scared shitless again.
Yeah, well, it's every day.
And it was like this cycle, and then recently I've kind of just realized, like,
It's just how it's gonna be.
It's just how it is, and you get into this. It's also she's hitting a stage where she's running and doing all these really incredible things.
Yeah,
and
careful.
Well, she's playing tambourine and and she's going for the piano.
Letting
It's
music just move,
love it.
just
Like, I'm
relax.
okay, let's do it, right?
Yeah.
So for me, like, it works so well with what I've already been doing. So it inspired me greatly to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So
That's the big inspiration. Is like, and to be fair, like the post office was destroying my life and taking a lot of that away. So it was kind of like,
But
That's
whose
where
life
this is-
doesn't the post office destroy? Really?
No, they just ruin everyone's life.
Yeah.
So how does that perspective change? Once you have that kid, when you're going back into the lab and making another guitar, does it change afterwards, or is it the same from prior to having your first child, or like is there any difference from that outward that total look on the guitar?
Changed because it's like, well, number one, I was just making guitars because I was just like,
Fixing
you
guitars,
gotta do something.
making
You got to
guitars,
do
yeah.
something with your time, right? But now I'm like, no, I want to do this to show her that, like, you can be your own boss. You can, not only run your own business, but like
Set your own
goals and like actually make your own essentially your own fucking life. You know? Like go about what you would like your life to be. And that's kind of what I did years ago. I conceived like, maybe I'll just move to the bush. Manitoulon's pretty close to that. Even though I live in town.
The prettiest town in Ontario.
Not anymore though. They took that sign away.
What?
Yeah. It's okay though. I know
Should be a
something
vote.
about it.
We need a vote on that again.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
Every day
every day.
is an inspiration.
Yeah,
and every day is different.
Well, and I mean, come on, man. I get to make guitars. I there are often times where I'm like, I get to make fucking guitars. I went on this path. There were times where I was gonna walk away from it because it was hard, but like anything that's like worth doing, you know.
Yeah. 100%.
For me, at least, like I don't really know what else I should be doing, which is probably why I get so frustrated with it, because I'm like, you know, I'm not necessarily. I don't know. There's really I can't imagine myself outside of this right now, which I think is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So go back to when you said it was so hard you almost walked away. What does that mean? Where does that come from?
That comes from
What's that like?
Just like, and that was even very recent. You know what I mean? And that I think was managing being a dad for the first time, new that as well, and like, you know, having a job that was draining, and like I was working on some insane projects. I took on the biggest mistakes I've made in being a luthier were taking on projects that were so ambitious that I think like even a luthier with like 100 instruments under their belt would struggle, you know? And that definitely pushed me into another level. Like I learned so much. I built this 5-string balalaika contrabass. The thing is like a giant Dorito. It's like weighed like 25 pounds. If you were to stand it up on like its like front, like top to bottom, it literally is as tall as me. And you were able to play this thing on a strap. Like this thing is a monster. Just nightmares every day for about 6 months. And that's the kind of Luthery things where I was like, I think I'm going to walk away from this. What did I do? But then I woke up when it was done and I was like, wait a second, I made a mistake. I just made a mistake. I took on things that were way above. And I've also had instances and situations where it's a very nuanced thing, craft to begin with. I think a lot of people treat guitars as like furniture, but when you hit this level of like actually spending money on a guitar, it's unless you have made the mistake before of mistreating it, it sucks to make it on your first nice guitar, and it especially sucks if that's the one that I made for you, and I have to tell you like, you know, the hard lesson, which is take care of your guitar.
Yeah. I'm
Like
so
even when I was going
guilty
to come
of
here
that.
with this, I was telling Neil about like, what's the humidity?
Yeah,
like?
what's the humidity factor in there? What's the temperature?
And I just
I'm
want to
like,
make sure.
dude,
And
I
like,
don't
luckily today it's raining, and like it's like the perfect circumstance, and it's the time of year where we don't have to worry. But in the dead of winter, when you have your electric heat and you leave your guitar next to your heater,
it's done.
and it's cracked, you know, like and I'm explicit. You know, I try to be above and beyond honest. I try to like lay it out for people what's going to happen in very black and white language, because I don't want to deal with that. I just spent
When that breaks, I have to fix it.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And sometimes like
Yeah, no, 100%. And you know, and I don't think we actually pay enough attention to that. But before we, you know, when you're talking about Poppy and you're talking about, I'll give you an example, because I do want you to play this guitar and I want to talk about that particular guitar. But so my youngest is I really miss, you know, having music at the school, right? Like full on,
with Joanne Smith.
just Joanne or Jen or
yeah.
like, you need to have that when you have kids. If kids aren't exposed to music, right, from a very early age, they miss out, man. They absolutely do. And recently Steve, he's from Wiki, retired teacher. What's his last name?
I can't remember.
Anyway, I apologize to Steve because I know his last name. He's coming over and he's doing, and my little one's playing ukulele. So she comes home and she's played these 3 chords, and I'm like,
Sweet.
let me, I know those 3 chords. So then she taught them to me on a ukulele because I didn't know them, right? And I'm like, you know what song this is? Right. So I started riffing off like hardcore, knocking on heaven's door, right?
Oh man.
And they're like,
Actually, Neil, wait, we got to get you doing this.
no, I know, no, on ukulele. And then so I'm listening to it again. I'm like, you know what? That's also the Hawaiian "I Will Lava You" song. So then they're looking it up, and Darcy and Aspen can both sing. And tonight, like right before you got here, they're like, so they start singing. I'm like, this is the I'm Loving You song. I was just like inspired, right? And when you have kids like that, when you have kids, that inspiration happens like that every day. And I would imagine hanging out with Poppy, right, allows you to be inspired to pick it up, because it just puts you in without the pull on your medicine wheel of some job that's just not entirely you, or not you at all, right? In
That's it.
It just opens up this space that just says, you know what? Let's just keep doing more of this, because watch what happens. And I want to hear you. I want to hear that guitar.
You want to hear it now?
I want to hear it right fucking now.
Okay, let's do it. So this one's called, I never even told you what the name of this one is.
No.
This one's Northern Light.
Northern Light.
Yeah.
And you're going to talk about it in a bit, but I want to hear it. Dude, that is just fucking awesome. Like, good for you, man.
Good for you, he says.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, man.
That's how that works, man. Like,
It's
when
true.
you're doing something like that and you see someone kick ass like that, I mean, what more can you say? But like, that fucking good on you. That's inspiring. I don't know about you, Jess, but I mean,
Well, Matt was playing while we were getting set up here, just playing a few chords and doing some progressions, and I'm bobbing my head, setting up the mics and getting the mixer ready, and he's just singing away over here. And he goes, "Dude, I'm so rusty this week."
Yeah.
I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Dude, I haven't played in like 6 months." He's like shredding the guitar over here.
yeah,
Well, it's the
but
honest
you know,
truth.
that's it. But those guys are different. That's a whole nother.
Yeah, I play
It's just a
music with
whole
Poppy
nother
every day,
level.
but it's just
Yeah.
like, do you love me and stuff like
Yeah.
that, right? It's
And
real basic.
The piece with when you're saying I haven't played, like, you play in bands and you play backup and you play whatever. I mean, I don't even know. I've seen you a couple of times, and every time you're rocking, you're moving people, right? And you're moving people just right out of thin air. You keep creating that sound, and it's just an amazing thing to watch. It's live music. It's
I know
fucking the best.
everyone just loves live music, and I take it for granted because I'm just like,
Yeah, it's your every day.
just do it every
And music is a powerful thing too, man. And you were talking about that in your garage, how you would have like little improv, spontaneous concerts where people would just show up and start playing like out of the blue.
Yeah, like we at New Year's was the funniest. Meg and I thought, like, okay, we'll have my cousin, his fiance, and like a few people, and it'll be nice. And then it just starts snowballing, right? And then all of a sudden, I look around in the shop. I'm like, we got 6 people upstairs, and the upstairs is like, you guys were up there. It's pretty tiny with a drum kit, and I'm playing electric guitar. One guy's playing harp. The other guy's singing. There's like a whole party of people downstairs listening, right? Like, that's just unplanned.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the thing about music and people like musicians. Like, so many of my friends are musicians, and they just have always been that way. I never planned it. It just happened to be that way, right?
Yeah.
And so, they come over.
And one thing leads
And
to
then one thing
another.
leads to another.
Then
Yeah.
you're in a concert.
Couple soda pops, and then here we go.
Do you have a favorite spontaneous music moment? Maybe not necessarily
shit,
where
man.
you're playing, but just in general, in terms of like, holy shit. that just happened?
Man, I don't know. Actually, there is a crazy moment I'll never forget. I went to go see Tom Waits in Columbus, Ohio. And that's a layered story, but I don't think it's legal for me to tell part of it. So, anyways, Tom Waits, I don't know if you're familiar with him. I mean, his music obviously can go in all kinds of directions. And what I appreciated about seeing him is like, he put on as much of a visual show as he did a musical show, but he did it in literally a master of subtlety. I'm talking like, the stage was very poorly lit on purpose, and he was standing on one of these giant like spindles for like cables for like hydro, massive, and that was what he was standing on, as this like pedestal. But clearly he had like layers and layers of dust and sand on it, so that every time he'd stomp, it would just like send stuff up into the air, right? And they had the light on it in a certain way.
Oh yeah.
And it was just like, what the fuck is going on? And so he got everyone, like, clearly the visual like element was heavy in the beginning, and the concert was like 3 hours long, and so you get really comfortable in that after about 2.5 hours, he starts playing the song. I think it was Chocolate Jesus, which I love, but like none of the songs live sounded like a lot of the ones on the record. They're totally different, which I also appreciate. Right. Anyone who does that, because he's an artist, right? Like he's really having a good time with his music, and that's really what he's been doing. But all the lights get real low, and a spotlight shines on him, and he turns around and he pulls out this rhinestone kind of like top hat. And the way that the light hits the hat, it starts shining like a billion lights in the room. And the room itself was like, it was built before the Civil War. So just to give you an idea of like, this theater was like, the seats, I swear to God, were like this. There was no room, and it was packed. I think it was only about 1,200 people. And like the guardrails were made out of gold, and like, it was like fucking insanity. I'd never been in a theater like that ever in my life. I don't think I ever will again. And that, I can't even begin to describe, but it looked like a million psychedelic glowworms all over the walls with the light shining on his hat. And he was just like, in
that dust and in all the dust, whatever.
With the crazy setting, you're just like, I don't even know what the fuck is going on right now.
Man,
that was one of the most absolutely like insane moments of my entire life related to music ever, because I was just like, I can't believe I'm fucking sitting here and this is what I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
There's another layer to that, but I won't go there. I'm insinuating on purpose.
Yeah, I get it. So if you were to take, like, walk me through that guitar a little bit, because I see I have so many questions.
Yeah.
When it comes to like, the inlaid stuff there. Right.
So, like, we could even go back a little bit to that first guitar that blew your mind.
Yep.
Because that one was called Cosmo for a reason. So I had used this burl that was given to me, this maple burl. I don't know if you remember the detail. Like, I left the live edge, so the finger rest, I had left it live edge, which I'd never really seen before. And the crazy part was it had these little spikes on it and these little faces and all these really freaky psychedelic pieces. And for a while I thought that was the direction I was going to go. But then I realized that there wasn't really a niche for it, sadly. Like, not many people were into it. Mm-hmm. Even the guy who bought the guitar, he took it off because it was a bit too freaky for him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So like, as far as I'm concerned, that's okay. Like, I'm glad that I managed to freak someone out a little bit with just like
that guitar like had lots of that though.
Yeah, it was all over.
Probably, maybe it was overkill in the the two sound holes and just the way they were, and because you kept like it confused you all the time when you looked at it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It was like off-putting in every way.
Yeah,
and that really set a bar for me. Like, in a sense, like, Okay, that's about as far out to left field as I can go. So now I'm gonna try and rein it in a little bit because,
But even the other one we looked at last week too, where you shifted everything down, that's a different podcast. Fuck it, I won't even talk about that guitar because we're still talking about Northern Lights here.
So this guy, this one actually, my focus on this was to try and make a mostly domestic wood instrument. So you have yellow cedar top, which is from BC, the West Coast. This is black walnut from Hamilton. Really nice stuff. Like really nice stuff.
Yeah.
And this is actually a carved back. So I'm sure Jesse and you can see that it's bulged out, right?
Right.
So this is not your traditional acoustic guitar in the sense that most of them are flat back and they're braced on the inside. This one actually, if you look at the back on the inside, it has no braces because it's carved out of 3/4 of an inch piece of walnut. So it's hollow on the inside, 3/16 of an inch the whole way, following the curve of the outside.
Right.
Same with the top. The top it's a little more tapered. It's about 1/8 of an inch on the edge, 3/16 for the most part, and then about 1/4 inch under the bridge. And so that gets mapped out. It's within like 20 thousandths of an inch. That's my tolerance. So like everything here is pretty
tight.
Yeah, pretty accurate. I try to keep it tight.
So now you've got this on the.
So the wraparound tailpiece. So like this is kind of, again, not the first time I saw it. Like, or I'm not the first person to do it, but I haven't really seen it that much, and a few people have come out and straight up just told me like, do that. That's cool. That's different.
That's badass.
Yeah, and so I have actually stuck with that of probably since number 21. I have been doing the wraparound stop tailpiece. Mm-hmm. So and I just did number 40 today. So
now you're 50%, pretty close.
Yeah, I'm getting close to like almost half of them. So that's for me to implement something and keep it for
that many.
For that many is actually rare. So I'm really, really happy with it. Like you can't really complain about even the construction of it is like I see people spend days and days and days making really intricately joined. You know, you have finger joints of ebony and you have a pin and etc. And it looks like it's very easy to make a mistake on and set you back 3 more days. And, you know, you only have to do that twice for me until I decide like it's no good.
Yeah.
And so ever since I switched to this, it usually only takes me 1 try. Usually only takes me about half a day. So half a day versus taking 2 days, I was pretty happy with that. And it's solid. Like it's so strong. It kind of surpassed my expectations the first time I did it. So
now you just said earlier before the podcast that you're thinking of doing one in copper.
Yeah, copper and steel. So that is,
or is that for a different?
It's because I'm thinking about doing an electric, and you have to ground your strings on an electric guitar. Yeah. And so I was thinking, normally you do it through the bridge because normally you're using a steel bridge, but I'd like to continue using wood, and so I'm going to incorporate the grounding aspect into the tailpiece. I know. That's bad. Yeah, so I'm trying to, and I obviously want to, like, for me, every I went to design school, right? So I probably should preface a lot of this too. Like I was indoctrinated back when I was 18 to 20 years old, and so form follows function for me every time. So like the function of an element is more important than the aesthetic outcome. Mm-hmm. But you kind of have to strike a balance, right?
But when it looks badass, and it is badass, it's badass.
It's fucking badass. So like, there's really, when I feel like when I really am honest with myself, that's when I can come up with ideas like this. When I go like, okay, I really want to distill, the essence of what it is and what its function is.
Right.
And then let's try and find a unique take on it.
And there you have it.
That's it. That's like the rationale behind most of my design choices and my decisions here.
So when you do that now, when you make one like that, are there pieces like the tail and what about the bridge? Is that something that's like, you know what, this is a pretty solid design. I'm
well,
not going to
it's
screw
not
with it.
my design. It's Jimmy D'Aquisto's, who, like, if anyone is listening to this and actually knows who that guy is, you know, kudos to you, because he's my biggest inspiration. I mean, I'm pretty sure anyone who's making archtop guitars right now like this would agree that he's kind of like, how could you not be inspired by him? Because he did so much as far as innovation, but taking guitars into like the modern era. You know, he really got people to step outside and think outside of the box. And the bridge is really massive to me, because the idea is, like, the argument is a violin bridge and a cello bridge is non-adjustable, and so it's just one solid massive wood. The problem is a guitar player likes the ability to adjust their action from gig to gig, or just from season to season, you know. And to compromise the tone, as much as some people think, like, the thumb wheels, you do it traditionally with these two little steel thumb wheels, and that is your point of contact between the bridge itself, or the saddle itself, and the bridge. And I think, you know, there's something to be said. There's going to be a bit of dampening there, a bit of loss of energy. And ever since I've switched to this, I just find it's not hard to make my guitars perform well. You know, I don't find myself, before I used to make a couple bridges and try experimenting with the voicing of the bridge, because, like, that's a whole other game. I switched to this, and I haven't really done that in a way that, like, I've switched bridges. I often do, just for fun, just to see, like, will it bring out a mellow tone, or will it bring out a bit more punch? And generally speaking, I can't really tell the difference when I do this kind of style. So
Now you say
good change.
You've got some adjustments in there to change.
So it's actually, this is a tapered wedge.
Right.
So if I were to pull it this direction, it would lower the action.
Yeah.
And then if I were to push it in, you got to loosen the strings to be able to do that. But and then if you push it in, you would be able to raise the action. So because, I mean, in our climate especially, and this is why I started doing this, is because we live in not a really guitar friendly climate at all. We live in kind of like
the temperature can change 50 degrees in one day.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember, like, it was like December 7th a few years ago. Like, I think it was like 2017. I remember it was like 14 degrees that day. And I was like, this is great. And then the weather at night was minus 14. And I was like, yo, we just had 30-degree change in one day.
People in, in the States, that'd kill them.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Like 30 degrees?
Even in BC, I saw people like, 2 inches
like
of
in
snow
Vancouver,
on Vancouver
it's
Island.
like, oh my God,
No, they didn't
it's
even know
apocalypse.
what was going on. It was a joke.
Yeah. No, I mean, but we're used to that, is what we're saying. I mean, we can make fun of them all you want, but I mean, we're used to that swing, and if the function doesn't work here, and you're a musician, well,
that's why I made the switch. I'm
good.
like, you have the freedom to make the adjustments. It's also, the neck has got a two-way adjustable truss rod, so you can adjust the action. For the way that I like to explain it is, in the wintertime, moisture gets drawn out and wood shrinks, and so your neck kind of bows back, so you can adjust the rod to counteract that. And then in the summertime, it all swells, it goes forward, and then you can pull it back. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that yourself unless you felt comfortable doing that. Otherwise, you come and see me.
Yeah, because now it was interesting you said earlier. So I repair guitars. That's what I do. Right? But that's not what you. It's what you do. If you were to say, okay, for the amount of time, when does it switch? When does it say, you know what, I don't repair guitars anymore? I build them? Or is that always a part of it because it makes you better, or it keeps you sharp, or you learn something every time you fix something? Or
it's actually like one of the better questions you could ask a luthier, because I think a lot of people, like, a lot of guitar makers just want to make guitars, and I get that. I actually like see that as almost like a cushy place to be, because like if I was like, literally, if I only had to focus on making guitars, I feel like the challenge would be a bit lost actually after a while, because I really do enjoy the challenge of a repair. Actually, ask me that while I'm working on a repair I hate, and see what my answer is, though. It's funny, but like I truly, in the end, like, I'm so grateful that I do the repairs, and I have learned so much, and I think as a luthier, you know, I don't want to sound like a snob because everyone has their own definition of what this is, right? But to me, a luthier is someone who not just builds but fixes. And to separate the two, you're doing yourself and not even yourself but the community a disservice, because you're keeping people from being able to play their instruments, and because like my rationale is, if you can't play your guitar, or if it plays like shit and you're not motivated by it, it doesn't inspire you, you're not going to make music.
No, I feel like I get it 100%.
And that's where I'm like, if I stop doing it, if I say no to the people who are like, yo, I have this
I'm not going to play my guitar,
and I can't really afford another guitar, but I know you can fix it, and I do that for people. I go like, I know you can't afford it, or it's a piece of junk, and yeah, it's not worth putting $100 in, so we'll put $70 in and we'll make it work for you.
Yeah.
And and that's actually those are the really interesting challenges when you do things on a budget. And I actually appreciate Manitoulin for that, because it's taught me how to like not lower my expectations, but be honest with people and really communicate with them and go like, this is what I can do. This is what I would like to do, which is often just sort of fire in the backyard. Yeah. But when things
but
become
if they got
$60
to make a guitar work again, to inspire them to play it, 10 more times in the next 3 months, right? There, you walk into a music store and it's funny because we had this conversation, and we should have had the podcast the first time. This should be a podcast too, but. Because when Matt's like, here, play this guitar, and I'm like, I'm not playing that. Like, I'm not worthy, right? And he's like, to you that sounded weird, because we're in awe, right? When things are awesome and you're in awe, you don't feel worthy. And you said, listen, like that good equipment makes you better, right?
That's what it is.
So play it, and so that. And I should have known that, because when you walk into a guitar store, right? I look around and I'll grab this guitar and I'll play the little few riffs I know, and I'm like, fuck, that sounds awesome. And then I'll grab this guitar. I don't think twice, right, about grabbing and playing it. But when you see the reverence, right, or whatever, you kind of, it's a good perspective to have, but it's also a good reminder to just like, if you can play more, if you can do more of the shit you love to do, then fucking do it.
That's it.
Right? And if you can do that, then so be it. And I love that part of the repair, is that, hey man, people just want to play guitar and have a little bit of inspiration in maybe an otherwise shitty day. Right?
Well, that's what music was always for me. Even when I was younger, I was like, man, it just like, whatever bullshit you're going through, it's good. It's good to get out of your head, right?
Yeah.
It's like my meditation. It was my meditation for many years.
Right.
Probably need to get back into it for that reason alone.
Yeah. Just balancing you out.
Yeah,
for sure.
I want to go back for a second. I hate to bringing it back, but we were talking about the different climates, especially out here, and when it's hot and cold, and you really have to consider the material part of putting what you put into this guitar. How do you figure out what kind of resources you're going to put in it, or when do you figure that out? Because you've got to consider the wood, you've got to consider, I would imagine, a whole number of factors.
It's pretty simple, and like I have like many just basic rules of thumbs with guitars. Keep it away from the heat. Keep it away from the sun. Like the sun is obviously a source of heat, so they're one in one. Yeah. But like some people don't make that connection.
Right.
Like if you're uncomfortable, it's probably uncomfortable.
Yeah. So if it's too cold outside for your dog, for you, it's too cold for your dog.
It's too cold for your guitar, right? If it's pretty hot for you, it's probably a little too hot for your guitar.
Yeah.
And then, in the wintertime, the thing about living in Northern Ontario and in rural places is you deal with wood heat. I mean, God, I tell people, keep your guitars far. Like, here's your wood stove, here's your guitar. Yeah. And if this is like the other side of your house and this is do it for yourself. I even started telling people, like, keep it in the friggin' bathroom if your house is that dry, because most people shower every day, and that little bit of humidity actually will make the difference between long-term a guitar that disappoints you versus one that you're really pumped on. You know? So, and that's what I tell people. Look, and I would never make a guitar knowing that it would leave and break, right? And so And it's hard to explain to people, like, why would I do that? Why would I spend all this time, hundreds of hours, and all these frustrating moments, and just these, just to know, like, well, whatever, it doesn't matter, it's gonna break. You know, it doesn't work like that. And so it's a two-way street. I do everything that I can. I try to inform you, I try to help you. I'm there for you. Like, I actually started putting my phone number in the guitar, which is incredible. I just started doing that because I said, screw it. Like, and I did it in a way where if you look down through the sound hole, you see my phone number. Because if you have any questions, if you're ever curious, like, and that's the thing, I want to form a relationship with people, because, like, you're buying something, like you guys said, it's like a part of me. There is definitely a part of me. Even if it's just a little one sometimes, it's enough to, like, they all have, like, I can remember all of them when they were nascent, when they were even just like an idea, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So the care that is required, you know, it is like, it's not just a throwaway object. Yeah. It's meant to be an heirloom. That's the idea. You're meant to give this to your kids. It's going to last longer than me if you take care of it. Yeah. And then last longer than you, usually.
Right. And it could be what's the oldest guitar or instrument that you've played that just sounded freaking badass? How old was it? 50 years old or older?
Like, the oldest instrument that I played that sounded good, that's a tough one. Actually, like, my friend Jamie Ward has this insane ukulele, Martin ukulele from like 1913 or something, 1919, in that pocket. And for a little ukulele, it just, it had like, it's giving me goosebumps. And that's the kind of thing about those little instruments, is like, in instruments that have matured that, and they have that reputation, is like, oh yeah, I see why, because they're just like cannons, you know. And funny enough, it's a ukulele that, like, thing I'm talking about. Yeah. Other than, like, if I'm gonna say guitar, probably the coolest guitar I ever played is not even an old guitar. Well, it was old enough. It was a Gallagher guitar. Actually, I can't remember if it was Gallagher. So Gallagher made guitars for Doc Watson. That was like his big, like, claim to fame. And he really made the best Martin copies at the time in the 70s. And this was a 70s Gallagher. And this was at Gruen Guitars in Nashville. It's like like whatever, like Gruen is in Visa commercials, just to give you an idea of how big his guitar store is. Right. And like, this Gallagher had been severely damaged and had been repaired, and was like, I think the other cool factor was that it was affordable. Like, I was like, oh my God, I could buy this. I thought about buying it. I was this close to buying it. Oh, really? Yeah. And I was like, holy shit. Like, and this is one of the best guitars I ever heard. And it blew, and I had literally just graduated from school. Meg and I were on, like, our honeymoon in Nashville, and she had dropped me off for the day while she went thrifting. And I just monked out in Gruen Guitars and played about 25 guitars. I also played a banjo from like 1860 that fucking rocked my world. And the cool thing about banjo culture, especially in the 1800s, was like, anyone and their mother made them. And so this was an unbranded homemade job that was just really, like, over the top with inlays, and just like it sounded beautiful.
Made a banjo.
Yeah. So, like, the thing about, like, being a luthier is it's very niche. In like, there's classical guitar, there's flamenco guitar, there's, right, you know, just your steel string. There's like making Martin and Gibson copies, and then there's archtop guitars, which is like what I really like, you know. And there's a lot of I don't know.
Yeah, it gets a lot of crossing over.
Yeah.
Do you consider the longevity of the materials that you're using beforehand? Like, when you're going out on the land and harvesting, how do you figure out what is going to be a part of that guitar? Does it happen spontaneously? Does it happen planned? How does that work?
Well, it's hard to, like, everything's planned, like, thoroughly. Not the harvesting part. The harvesting part is like the real mystery. That's when you're like, what are we gonna get? You know. Mm-hmm. Like, this has the lightning struck apple.
Still, there's a little bit of lightning strike in there.
The lightning is going to be on as many guitars now as I can from here on out.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
I can talk about it a little bit, but I can't talk about it too much because
it's not here.
the thing about the tree is it was pilfered, and so like it was like taken from essentially like a ditch, and it was kind of like you're just like we don't know if this is anyone's, but we're doing it because
Road allowance.
yeah, the tree was hit by fucking lightning and was hollowed out. And this is Steve Radulovich, who I can't really talk about making these guitars without even mentioning Steve,
Right.
because like he just has
I carved Manitoulin.
yeah, I carve Manitoulin. He's like he does carve all of Manitoulin everywhere.
Just his colleague.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
And-
crime.
Oh man, I love Steve.
Yeah, he's the best. And so, and he like, it's kind of like the symbiotic relationship where he comes over and I get him all excited, and then he goes out in the bush and he comes back and he's like, pretty good. And you're like, Steve, like that's even better than anything
Yeah.
I had ever dreamed
He's
of.
like an excited little puppy. He just
He
goes out
totally
and
is.
he
And
brings
he's
back.
just like so giddy about.
yeah, I
He
love
gets
his
more
energy.
excited than I
Yeah.
do about like just like the harvesting, right?
I'm
Or-
scared to have Steve on the potty.
Dude,
way.
you have to just manage like
Off the rails, let's do it.
volume.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it'll get out of hand. It'll be like a 3-day potty.
That's in
Oh,
the bag.
yeah.
That's a special edition.
Oh,
That's-
for sure.
That'll be a Christmas special.
We'll probably end up going out in the bush one day because you gotta go there with Steve, and we've got to do it because it's really neat. Like we have this one ironwood that we're eyeing up. The cool thing about working with Steve too is he's got so much respect for it, like I do. Like we both have like tons of respect for the fact that shit, man, we're working with trees that are like thousands of years old sometimes. You know, like I respect like this yellow cedar. I know is probably like an 800-year-old tree. You know what I mean? So,
Really? Like, where do you find?
That's from BC though. Like a lot of the trees out west were.
So you'll order, or you'll have a connection, or you'll
That's really
have,
what it is. Yeah, connections.
right? And then they'll have a, like, even if you've got the face, what if? How do you decide? Okay, well, we're going to use this yellow cedar or whatever. You call them and say, I'm looking for a piece of 800-year-old.
Oh man, I stumbled upon that. I went to a wood supply store and they had it in their discount, and I was like, you know, see you later. Like, because it's not
You just
common
say,
tone wood.
"What?"
Yeah, and when it's not common tone wood, call me, because like I like trying everything. I want to try because there's so many combinations of wood, and I mean, like, everyone has something to offer. Everyone has a different voice. I mean, even every guitar can be looked at as like an individual, and they should all be looked at like individuals, and everyone will have an individual voice. Even like you're talking about, if I were to try to make 20 guitars the same, I couldn't even. I bet, like, even if I tried to make them to spec the same, they would all have different voices.
Oh yeah, no, and I think that's what would make them so cool. Okay, 3, maybe not 20.
I think
I'm-
3 is
I'm
probably
looking-
what like.
If you were to do or try one, right, or try a set, because it would be so cool. Well, this is number 2 was your favorite, but number 1 was Jess's, and number 3 was, you know, mine, because it would appeal to you, probably because of what you put into it at the time, how you were feeling. I mean, do you think that actually really translates into your build?
Well, it translates into the way that I view it. It's funny because like every one of them gets a different reaction from everyone else. Like, you know, from every person. I had one guy played like this one in the Ladybug, and he was just like, he didn't know what to say. He just kind of stood there and was like, I like them both. Like, how do I pick one? Because I asked him, like, which one do you prefer? And he's like, I don't know. Like, they're both like speaking to me. I'm like, okay, well that happens, you know.
Come back in a week.
Well, it's hard because he works for Long McQuaid, and he's like a sales rep, and you know, I take certain people's like what they say with a grain of salt, and I take other people like, that's why I asked him, because I knew he had an opinion.
Yeah.
And to get that kind of response was like better than what I had expected.
Okay. Do you have a, like, I envision that where he tries it out and he's indecisive, and then, you know, a week later your shop door opens and there's some little bells that is like ding-ling-ling, and then it's like,
I wish.
Take it.
okay, I need to play that one again, and you're like, oh, okay, and you just march over. And
That was mostly like because I knew he was in town. This is Matt Foy. So Matt, great musician. I've known him since I was like started playing at the Townhouse when I was young. He was playing with Jamie, and he was just in town, and I said, like, dude, you guys got to come by. I just fired these guys up for the first time. Just want want an opinion, because
Yeah.
I've been staring at these for months, and it was cool to get that kind of like feedback. Was really neat.
I saw Gravy the other day at the Wiki
Oh yeah,
Job
he told me
Fair.
about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I
Well,
mean-
he's the Science North guy now. So
Is he the Science North guy?
yeah, so he does education for Science North.
Yeah, well, he's a good musician too. Anyway,
Yeah,
I knew I recognized him.
He's getting away from it, which is sad.
Really?
Yeah,
Why is that?
because I think he's just too busy. He also has a daughter, Lily, who's pretty young, and so
Busy.
busy man.
Yeah,
And,
but
like,
you know
and
what?
that's where I'm like, I don't play as much as I want to, like in the capacity that I want to, which is like,
Yeah,
I'm
but I
gonna
don't
learn a
think.
song.
I don't know if you ever get away. I think when it's that big apart, I mean, sure you might drift for a little bit because shit
That's true.
happens and life's busy, right? And you do have those commitments that have to be honored because bread needs to be on the table. But when you figure out a way to just make it a part of that, then part of your everyday and a part of how you put bread on the table, that's and you show people and inspire people that it can be done, then you start really toying with this abundance mentality that maybe there is enough to go around if people chase that a little bit and let go of the convention of that everybody else puts on how they're supposed to grow up and live. Right? It challenges that. And maybe, I love that. I think that's awesome. If everybody could do that, that fucking fuels my fire.
Fuels everyone. It actually would probably.
Would be in a better world.
We would be. Yeah, I agree. That's exactly, you took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I even think for someone like my friend, like it is, and I said earlier, it's like my meditation. It is meditation. And I think that's another thing that people don't do enough is like close your eyes and step outside of whatever it is that you're experiencing and just like be a fly on the wall in a way,
Yeah.
And that's what I think music has allowed me to do is just like be like, what are you asking me? What are you talking about? And that's what's wonderful about music is it just kind of like I can separate myself from it.
Yeah.
From everything.
Do you remember the first time you picked up a guitar?
Very much so, actually, like pretty vividly. I could even like tell you the person and the place. My friend Joey, when I was like, God, I think I was in grade 5, but I'm gonna go out and say like actually played was grade 6. And I saw him play Sweet Dreams by Marilyn Manson, and I was like, man, that's pretty badass. Like I sure would love to do that. And he's like, that's hard, so I'm gonna have to show you how to play Smoke on the Water, like everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
so I
that was
Smoke
my
on the
first song
Water.
too.
And it was on a Samick electric guitar that was like a Strat copy. And at the time I wanted to be a drummer, but my parents were like, no fucking way you're going to have drums in our house.
Yeah.
And then actually I was a bass player for most of my beginning sort of music endeavor. From the time I was about 13 to got my actual first acoustic when I was about 18.
Really?
Yeah. So I've only been playing guitar since like I was 18.
Now, I have a question because the bass thing, I can't play bass guitar, but if I did, like I'd play that thing super fucking high, like way up here, like right. Or where do you play yours? Because I would think I'd want to be like.
No, I think I played mine like to my knees.
Way low.
Yeah, like super low.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I've never played. But I always like to ask that question.
It's a good question. That's like
because it's
just leaning on your titties.
Yeah. No, I'd want it in my beard, dude. Like I'd be wanting to get it in the way, like this, whatever. But I don't know.
That's what I want to bring you back on with my cousin Matt, because I know he's a big fan of the bass guitar. I mean, he's been playing since he was like 10 or 12 years old.
That is exactly who we should get in on the next.
Exactly,
Maranger. Because
Matt would have so much to add and to contribute, and you guys can bounce each other's ideas off. And like he played in a band that toured the States and Canada for probably 5-6 years called Booze Cruise, and he had another band, Overtime Heroes, which came to an end when he started to have kids, right? So he kind of put the dad hat on instead of the tour man hat. But I mean, you guys, I'm sure would have a blast, and I'd love to hear you two rattle ideas off, and with regards to the technicalities of guitar making
Yeah.
and playing and music in general. So
Yeah.
if you're open to that, I'd love to set that up in the future.
You know, when Jess asked, you know, do you remember picking up your first guitar? I had a student one time, and he's a good friend, and Braden Taboski, BT, and you know, BT he just didn't want to be a school oriented kid. That's just not how he was wired, right? And I remember I taught him in grade 8, and he's a freaky dude, and he's kind of eccentric. He's a welder. Like now he's phenomenally successful. But I remember so specifically, and we would sit at the back of Kenj. That building's not even there anymore, right? Because the classroom was back there, and we had guitars there, and I'm playing during lunch, and BT is looking at that. He's watching me, and he's just watching my fingers, and I could see it making sense. And he's kind of just waiting for me, and he's like, "Can I try?" And I'm literally, he was like, "Can I try?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." Right. And he picked that thing up, and within, I'd say that was in the spring, and when school let out, he's actually they formed a band IL2, like they went on to high school to form a band in high school. Like it just made sense.
Right. It came to him. You know what's funny, Neil? That's exactly like once my friend taught me, like, you take the pick, you hit it, you put your finger down. I was like, that's all I needed. And
Yeah,
I was
that's
on my
how
way.
it was. That's
freaky,
exactly
man.
how it was. It was just like, wait a second, I think I can. You know, when you see kids do that with a piano or whatever, right? That was fucking. I remember that moment for Brad. I mean, maybe he did have a guitar before, but he just was like, I want in, right? And that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome to see that.
Well, it's a cool moment. Like I'm glad you asked that because I haven't thought about it in a long time. And oddly enough, that guy got a hold of me last year and was like, because he is really responsible for putting a guitar in my hand, and was like, hey, I actually want to make guitars and fix them and stuff. So
yeah,
I've been kind of helping him just kind of get started in that, which is kind of, I thought that was really cool. I kind of got to, I mean, how do I ever pay a guy back like that?
right.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, you put a guitar in my hand and here I am. Like, it's kind of freaking insane. Like the influence that guy had. So
What influence drove you to do that finger rest? Explain that.
It's funny that you're picking the finger rest of all things to isolate.
I'm just looking at it, and I see that had to be influenced by something.
Yeah, 100%. And like there's a whole school of more minimalist modern guitar making that evolved after Jimmy DeQuisto, and that is like totally inspired by his school of, because normally pickguards are these big, they're big, ostentatious, they take up a lot of real estate, they're like usually just made of plastic, which I'm not a massive fan of.
Right.
And I realized like they take away a lot of the aesthetic of a guitar. Also, I wanted to make sure that this still like shined through, didn't get covered, right? I could have easily covered the other inlay, and then what the hell was the point of that? And so out of that, I was like, well, I guess I got to come up with a solution. And I actually really like the minimal finger rest because it's like the whole aesthetic of the guitar now is that much more refined.
Yeah. No, it is refined for sure.
And that's the goal for me, is like to have that simple. I don't want to make, see, the thing is they are already kind of like in your face. I don't want to make it more in your face.
Yeah.
Cause I could. And I've thought about like this,
Like Cosmo.
yeah, I like Cosmo. And
I was going to refer back to Cosmo. Where is Cosmo?
in Japan.
Damn it. We can't get him for the podcast.
Japan's a bit of a ways away.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other story, actually. Cosmo actually ended up.
I think you should show us how that finger rest works.
You mean like just like?
No, I mean play something.
I guess I got to play something, eh? messed up the end there.
That's awesome.
Sweet deal.
Yeah, that is
Man,
amazing.
thanks a lot, man. I mean, before we do wrap this up, I would kick myself in the ass if I didn't ask you to name your top 10 people to ever pick up a guitar.
Ooh.
Oh,
Top 5,
dude,
sorry,
that's
not
a
10,
hard
not 10,
question.
not 10, 5, top 5.
You know what? It should almost be 10, and there's going to be like a bunch of doubles.
Like, and then there'd be like, there's 10.
And can we
there's
not put them in
9A.
order? There's no, like, this is...
Not
Sure,
preference.
this
No one
is
better than the
no
next.
no rank.
Okay,
Okay.
0 rank.
And I'm going to not try and think about it too much.
Okay.
So, the first one, though, I'm going to talk about is Zalman Ianovsky.
Okay.
And Zali played in the Love and Spoonful. And it's kind of a crazy story to me how Zal kind of faded into obscurity, which is essentially because he got caught with a joint, and it was either he give up his dealer or go to American jail being a Canadian for 25 years. So he
Right.
gave up his dealer's name, and essentially everyone in the scene said, you got to go now because we don't have a drug dealer. And he's from Toronto, and so he ended up, from that point on, moving back to Canada and opened a restaurant, and the rest is history, right? It's kind of freaky because he was in Love and Spoonful, who was responsible for Summer in the City and Daydream and all these like really
Yeah.
big 60s numbers. The thing about Zali is like he literally can play everything. Like he can fucking play banjo, he can play any kind of acoustic guitar, any kind of electric guitar. The guy was like a monster, and he ended up touring with Chris Christopherson and got kicked off a tour because his manager was like, yo, that guitar player is like haywire. You don't know what he's going to do next in his playing. And it's true, because he'd just be like doing like something really nice, and then he'd just be like full volume out of nowhere, right? And that's what was so cool about him, is he just had this like, his personality came through in his playing, and it was like he had an obnoxious personality. And that's what I fucking loved about the music that he made, is it like, you can tell the guitar playing is like out of this world. And also he did stuff like, you'd think that you're listening to organ, but it's electric guitar, which is like, I don't even understand how he did that a bunch. And like, you think you're listening to the auto harp, but actually you're listening to acoustic guitar, which I don't even understand. So like, he's just like, all these years later, he's still probably the best guitar player to me. Like, in the sense that he can just do so much, and there's so little evidence of what he was able to do. Like there's only 3 Love and Spoonful albums plus his own album, and that's it.
Right.
And just from those, I'm just like,
He's bad.
blows my mind.
Yeah.
So he's the man for sure. The other guy is Clarence White. I don't know if you guys know Clarence White.
Nope.
He died young. He was like 27, I think, when he died in a motorcycle accident. Probably the best bluegrass guitar player that lived, like outside of, like he wasn't he was a North Carolina guy, I think. So he was like, he was a hippie type, but like everyone in country had total respect for him because he was a monster.
Right.
So Clarence White, I can't even begin to like talk about how that guy, if I could play guitar like Clarence White, I'd probably quit everything. I'd probably quit guitar making and just tour, because the guy had the biggest bag of tricks of anyone, other than like maybe like a guy like Danny Gatton. Danny Gatton is just worth mentioning because like no one knows him. So like Clarence White, Zali,
3.
Danny, like Chet Atkins and Merle Travis. Those two. I mean, come on. Just the like. That whole kind of playing is like, that's what I grew up in in my 20s, just trying to be like an acoustic guitar guy, just playing by myself. I don't need anyone, I don't need a band. I got it all, right? Then I realized I like playing in a band. But so those two guys. How could I ever not mention Merle Travis or Chet Atkins? Like one guy who's not really known as a guitar player is John Hartford, because John could play banjo and violin just as well, but was a monster guitar player, like just a monster musician in general.
Right.
Monster songwriter, probably one of my favorite songwriters. I have to mention him because if I didn't, I'd probably listen to this and go like, why didn't I mention John? So what are we at? Like
That's six.
Six. And then there's like obvious guys, but you cannot, like Chuck Berry and for me, what's his name? Howlin' Wolf's guitar player. There's just like, I just realized, Hubert Sumlin. Hubert Sumlin. There's another guy I would super regret not mentioning. That guy was literally ripped off by everyone in the 60s. You go and listen to Howlin' Wolf, his self-titled, it's called the Rocking Chair album because it's just a picture of the rocking chair, and tell me that Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, anyone in the 60s playing rock and roll did not rip off, like, just the style, just the tone, not even the notes and like the playing itself, just like the approach, the attitude. So like super important, Hubert Sumlin, man.
Oh, really?
A name that no one fucking knows and is like probably one of the most important guitar players in history, especially in rock and roll and you know, rock, like blues and stuff.
Right.
And speaking of that, Charlie Christian. How could I not mention Charlie Christian? Like the godfather of electric jazz guitar. And I have to say Django Reinhardt because like you're a fucking idiot if you don't say Django Reinhardt and you're a guitar player.
So
that's
like you're
nine.
just making weeks worth of work for me and Jess.
That's
to-
it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly why I asked.
Oh yeah.
Because then we're
I
gonna
need
go
to
back and
expand
listen
my
and be like,
library.
You have
who
to.
the fuck is that guy?
Oh, yeah.
No idea. Yeah.
I got one more. I got one more. I'm glad it like actually it's a pretty decent list. Joe Pass. Oh fucking Joe Pass, man. I could listen to that guy play like improv all day. He just what he can do with a guitar. And his albums with Ella Fitzgerald are like jazz standards, right?
Right.
But that stuff, that's like what my grandma would listen to. I listen to Joe Pass, like the virtuoso stuff, and it's like mind-boggling. And it's just one guy just playing guitar, one take, just to really fuck with your mind. That's my 10.
Okay, well
That's a hell of a
that's
list,
like
man.
14 probably, but you know what? Before we do, you know, it's in terms of inspiration and listening to kick-ass guitar, it's my opinion that not only are you a kick-ass guitar maker, but I love listening to you play. Every time I go and hang out, I'm inspired, and being inspired to do whatever. To do more of whatever your voice is, whether it's, you know, getting outdoors more or playing piano more or playing or drawing more or reading more or whatever the fuck it is, watching this and listening to you inspires me to do what I love to do more. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And like I know for a fact, Jess, I don't know what you, but this is like going to be a recurring potty for us, is having Matt come over and maybe
Keep you guys
mix
up
it
to speed.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, because we're just getting started.
And so am I. And I'm so glad you guys had me out. Like
Yeah.
we've been chatting extensively for too long. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Why don't you play one more little ditty there?
Play us out, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to think of like, you know, I mentioned Clarence.
Oh, before you do you have any plugs? Like any ways people can get to know Matt? Like, do you have any Twitter or anything online?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, like Maranger Instruments
Right.
is my handle. Facebook, Maranger Instruments. That's it.
Okay.
Call me, come and see me.
Yeah.
Email Neil.
Yeah. For repairs, for lessons, if you want to make your own guitar.
Yeah, I'm definitely starting to do that more, which
Yeah.
has been really inspiring.
Yeah.
That's in a whole other podcast, really.
Yeah.
Is talking about how, you know, I'm enabling a few people to be able to do that on their own, and it's a really special experience for people. I can see like one guy, Mike could be his own podcast because his story is pretty heavy, and so the guitar making has been kind of like therapy for him.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm glad I could do it. You know.
Awesome.
Oh, man. Thanks, Matt. Play us out, man.
Okay.
There you have it. Fueling his passion and fueling his fire. Thanks, Matt. We appreciate
My
that.
pleasure, guys.
And we will have you back.